Welcome back into Climbing the Summit podcast, where the ultimate summit is self discovery, self realization. I'm your host, lead explorer, Danny Cobbin, and a host of activities have went on since the last time we've gotten a chance to sit down with each other and just discuss life's ups and downs. And this past weekend was another yoga weekend. So, as you know, I've been steeping in this for quite some time. And a question came up, and the question was, how do I see further than I already see? Right. So, how, if I am angry, how do I overcome my anger so that I'm no longer upset with my loved ones, no longer ruining my own life because of my anger? Somebody said, I am angry and I want to change that. Right. And once that comes about, once that occurs, it's interesting because the very first thing that you have to do or that you want to do really is to start to notice. Um, yeah. It, Noticing is first, but like that's not the baby step. I'll be real with you. The baby step, the first baby step would be to give yourself grace. So like 0.05, the thing you do is grace. And interesting thing about grace is it's undue, unjust, unrewarded favor. So that's interesting, right? Is like I say on Mondays, give yourself grace. And people used to be like, well, what do you mean give yourself grace? What do you mean by that? And what I mean is, you may not feel in the moment like you deserve to feel good. You may not feel like in the moment that you should be at your best self or whatever it is that you may feel on that Monday or any day of the week. But if you give yourself grace, undue, unjust favor, and you recognize, oh my gosh, I am a human being living a human existence on this ball or this rock called Earth, spinning through space, essentially chasing after a different rock, and billions and zillions of planets with solar systems and galaxies, and how crazy is it that once we start to notice, we get perspective, things look just a little bit differently. So once you've given yourself a little bit of grace, the next thing is to start to notice what's in alignment with yourself. Notice what's in alignment with who you want to be and what's not, right? That anger piece. I got angry. I said something. Like I give you, you know what? I could give you an example. This morning, I'm coaching Courtney and I say downward facing dog, and she goes to a bear squat. And instead of me just calmly saying, downward facing dog, and then showing her, I was like, you know what a downward facing dog is. And there's this moment of like panic or frustration where if it was anybody else, I would just explain it to them. I mean, I would show it to them. Those things would naturally come for me to do. But because me and her have been in a certain dance, a certain pattern for so long, it feels as if this just kind of comes out. And that's my conditioning. And that's what's interesting, right? Is once I begin to notice my conditioning, right? It's like an action, a stimulus happens, my conditioning happens. And because my conditioning plays out, I give you the standard response. But if I start to notice my conditioning in real time, I could start to observe what's happening in that interaction. And then I can make the adjustments necessary in order to live in that interaction in the best way possible. Now, to me, that is such a fine distinction, but that's not where it began, right? Where it started was years ago. I would be driving for UPS and it'd be 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd be loopy and dazed, and I don't know what's going on because it's 100 degrees outside, and I'm not drinking enough water. I'm not taking enough breaks. I'm not finding enough shade, and I'll just be just going off about stuff, and something would happen in my world, and I would just go off about that thing, whatever it was. And that was where some of that anger used to come from. And it wasn't until I left my job, recognized that I was still angry, even though it wasn't my job that was making me angry, although I thought so. So like there's a lesson in there for y'all who want to leave your job because you're angry. It's not actually your job. It might be your job. Don't get me wrong. It might be your job. It might be your boss. It might be that. But it also could be the way you're interacting with your reality. That's what it was for me. My bosses were cool. Like, so I didn't have to worry about that. That wasn't the thing. But I was generally mad about the whole thing. So once I began to start to notice, right, my inner world, things changed. And they can change for you too. And once that happened, I was like, all right, well, okay, well, what do I need to do? And yes, I can begin to notice, I can begin to get in alignment. But if I want to, I don't want to say expedite the process, but like if I was playing the Mario video game, you on level 1.2, you jump up above the bricks, you run all the way to the end, and there's 3 teleports, and you could teleport to a different world ahead of where you were currently at, right? A little shortcut for concentration, for finding these things is meditation. And remember, meditation is concentration. And what happens is once you start to practice, you start to shut the outside world out. That's what I did, at least. I started to shut the outside world out, and I started to see the repetition of the thoughts, how many, how frequent, how fast, how vigorous they started to come. And I wanted to run from it at first. But I remember when I was in Super Coach Academy, and Claire, I love Claire, she pointed out to me that I had a busy mind, and I never noticed it before. And I think that's a piece of an exercise for you one day, is just to like notice how busy your mind is and notice if you can shut it up or not. When I was at Super Coach Academy, would play Linda Pransky, and Linda Pransky asked this question one time. She was like, if your mind is busy, how would you shut it off? How would you quiet your mind in real time? And it was like people would answer, they would go to a quiet room, or they go for a drive. And she would point out how these are all external things that you would do, but those are internal things to do to quiet your mind. And there's just these like fine little details that they were cool for me to just hear up front, right? Like I'm throwing stuff at the wall for you, because once you begin to head down this journey for yourself, right, and you start to see how your thought created reality is holding you back from your creativity, holding you back from more love, holding you back from the things that you want in your life. Like I started to see for me, I started to naturally wanted to find better ways to engage with my outside reality. And the only way to do that is to begin to notice my inside reality. So in Animal Flow, something really cool that I learned is ground reactive forces. So if I stomp my foot in the ground is sending all of that force back into my leg. So if I land softly, all that jarring force doesn't go back into my own body. And the same is true in this regard. Like if I'm wanting to stop being angry, but I'm being angry to stop my anger, I'm using the wrong tool. I'm using the wrong ability as a human being to move forward. We're not taught that. It's a misunderstanding, right? It's like we don't know these things. We should be taught these things. I agree. It's kind of sucky that you got to hear it on a podcast from a random dude that you may or may not know, right? But it's interesting what is possible and what can become of who you are and who you want to be, no matter where you are in your life and in your journey, once you start to see that it's not the outside world that you're interacting with. You are interacting with the outside world. But the best example I've ever heard is if I'm in a conversation with my significant other, right? It's not me and my significant other that are talking. It's I'm talking to my significant other in my head, and my significant other is talking to whatever version they have of me in their head. No, do we want to be doing this? No. But this is what we do. So that person can say something to me when I'm in a low mood, and I can interpret it the wrong way. If you had that experience before and you've wondered how to get out of that vicious loop, just begin to notice. Start to pay attention to yourself in those moments. Are you in alignment? Do you feel love? Do you feel more love in the conversation? The answer is no. Back out. Back out. Whatever that is, whatever that information was, where it's like, no, I need you to know my point. I need you to feel it, or else nothing will change. Like, just feel how that feels inside of you. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes it feels very powerful. And that's why I continue to be angry. It's because I felt like I was taking my power back. And it wasn't until I burned myself out and got Bell's palsy, half my face stopped working, that I recognized that there's a different way. You actually can get further faster if you start to see how thought plays a role in your life. Once you start to see how thought plays a role in your life, you can go about your journey however you want to. But that's when meditation kicked in for me. Though meditation didn't mean a lick of anything before I recognized my thought created reality. And then I start to think to myself, how do I settle myself inside of myself? And I had to close my eyes and shut out the outside world for me to go deep enough inside of myself to start to recognize the difference between the bubbling up of insight and the ticker tape of thought. And Yoga Sutra 114, it talks about you have to practice for a long time, and it has to be continuous. And when those things start to occur, the magic, the super, Michael Neal used to say this, and I love it every time. We're not superhumans, but being human is super. And the reason why being human is super is because once you start to see thought created reality, you start to see you can go into the settings menu of your own life. You start to see that you can go into not only the settings menu, the pause menu, right? You're playing Mario, you hit the pause button, you could go to the menu, you could change a few settings there. Same is true with us. And the way I found to do that is meditation. I get to look at the space between thought long enough that I start to see the unfolding, right? Like, yeah, it's darkness. Yeah, I don't know how to explain it to you. I'm doing the best that I possibly can. But what's powerful here is you don't have to take my word for it at all. What's powerful is just look at your own life. Look at the areas where you have won, where you are winning. What about those things are you winning at? Huh? Like what is it? Like, what's the thing? Are you listening to your habitual thoughts that you're listening to in those areas you feel like you're losing? Probably not. Probably you feel the thoughts, you feel the feelings, and you do the thing anyway. But in this area of life, it doesn't look like you can, but you can. So if you want to look further, if you want to go further faster on your journey, you actually stop, slow down, and actually get a feel for how to utilize controls, utilize the best gift we have as human beings, our mind, which lays on this bed of consciousness. I love you guys. Keep climbing towards your personal summit, and we'll see you guys next time.